Well, we found out in the first week of the war that the Russians' military, from a conventional point of view, was not nearly as important as it looked to be. We now know that the United States, NATO in general, is running out of a lot of the equipment that the Ukrainians need to fight, because that's not how our militaries are designed. The US does not do massed formations. We do precision from distance to destroy command and control and logistic hubs. And then we go in and clean up. The Russians are going inch by inch by inch, destroying everything. And fighting that requires a different sort of military. And we can't train Ukraine with the weapons that we use for the long-range stuff, because that isn't something you do in a few weeks. That's something that takes a few years. We don't have that kind of time, even if we were willing to share our top-shelf technology, which I think is open to debate. So we're running out of the sort of stuff that the Ukrainians can use. And we're probably going to be largely tapped by October. So if Ukraine has not ripped the guts out of the Russian military by then, this war is going to take a very different turn, because you will have a large, manpower-heavy Russian army that has low morale and poor equipment against a Ukrainian force that doesn't have weapons. There's no math there. But the Russians know they can't face us in a conventional war. And that's where the nukes come into play. Especially if the Germans have flipped. Because if the Germans have flipped, there's no defense of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and Romania anyway. So the Russians are playing their cards on the diplomatic and the economic side of this very, very well. And to be perfectly blunt, it's not a hard hand to play. The Germans have pushed for 40 years against depending upon Russian energy and raw materials. And we're seeing where it leads. And before you criticize the Germans overly, because that's justified, this is not a new problem. Germany and Russia are our neighbors. And they try to get along so that they don't have to go to war, and then it ultimately falls apart, and they go to war, and they go try to get it together afterwards to try to prevent the next one. That's all they can do. It's just that we're unlucky enough to be living in a time where we're in one of the zigs rather than the zags. Well, history is a series of cycles of an organizational structure forming and generating a golden age, and then breaking apart under its own inconsistencies and collapsing. And what we know as history is highs and lows, highs and lows. Globalization has been the biggest high we have ever had. And its break apart was always going to hurt a lot. The demographics are just filtering in on top of that, making it worse. But we're now in a position where roughly half of the Earth's surface has industrialized and urbanized and is not subject to the collapse. Will it be inflation? Yeah. Will it be awkward? Yeah. But think of the level of awkwardness that the UK and the US has to do. We have to double the size of our industrial plant. Yeah, that's expensive. Yeah, that's inflationary. That's a wonderful opportunity. It's going to generate some of the fastest growth in human history in the next 5 to 10 years. We know that global agricultural supply chains are going away, but not ones in North America or in the UK, most likely, which means we can incorporate some of the digital technologies that are past the prototype stage into the next generation of farm equipment and double yield. This is a good thing. It's inflationary in the short term, but it's a good thing. Unlike the great collapses of the past, large portions of the world, large viable portions of the world are not breaking. So when we get to our next rise 20, 30 years from now, all of the building blocks of society of today will not have been lost. This is not the Bronze Age collapse. This is not the fall of Rome. This isn't even the disintegration in the aftermath of World War II. There's pain. There's going to be a lot of ugly. But we're not looking at a civilizational break here like we have every other time. That's a good thing. I think we're seeing, imagine if we could see the final days of the Roman system without the final days of Rome. Some version of that is where we're going. This is not like this isn't like the Dark Ages where the Arabs held the knowledge but didn't touch it for 1,000 years. Silicon Valley's still there. London is still there. And it's going to keep being Silicon Valley and London. What's happening is a contraction of what we consider to be the economic family of the world into the parts of the world that are more viable. And we're going to be able to continue to tinker with these technologies until the rest of the world is ready to rejoin. That could be a lot worse. Well, social media is definitely part of the problem rather than part of the solution, because we've given every Yahoo a bullhorn. And those Yahoos sometimes get together, say the same thing, and elect people to Congress and Parliament. There's not a lot we can do about that at the moment, but I think a bit of a historical comparison, it might be useful. In the 1800s, we had a new technology called the telegraph, which, like social media today, revolutionized our relationship between geography and information. Suddenly, you could send information across a continent in seconds. And that generated yellow journalism. Because, like with social media today, there were no restrictions on who could share the information, and so people would just make stuff up. And among other things, that got the United States involved in the Spanish-American War. Because people eventually bought the propaganda. Well, it wasn't propaganda, it was just flat out lies, and that triggered a conflict. That also, among other things, is shaping our political space in both of our countries right now. We're seeing that with Trump, we're seeing that with Johnson, we're seeing that with everyone who wants to challenge them. Now, social media will eventually be brought into check, just like the telegraph did. Eventually, we both passed slander and label laws. We need something like that for social media. Do we do that in a year? Probably not. If so, the Americans would have done it in the aftermath of the January 6th issue of last year. Or is it already the year before? Sorry, time is flying by. But that is an issue for my Congress and for your Parliament. I would expect Parliament to act on it quicker because your system is less clunky than ours. It's actually designed to govern. It's designed to govern as opposed to designed to debate. So we are, in the U.S., once again looking to our parents for a potential path out of this. Please don't let us down. It's new. I mean, remember, social media was only designed, 15 years ago, and only kind of entered into the mass consciousness within the last 6. It's very, very new. And one of the many reasons I'm looking to the UK rather than the US for the first steps in this, you guys don't have a constitution. Normally, that's a negative. We're seeing that with Brexit, but it means little things like free speech are not inviolable. And that allows you to tinker with the legal structure that's necessary to contain this technology without immediately threatening the core precepts of your country. This is a good thing because it allows you flexibility that we don't have. That is one of the downsides of your system. I will give you that. There's no challenge there. I mean, not having it all written down sometimes is a negative. Usually is. Right. Not for this. Now, something else that's different about our systems, another reason I'm looking to the UK over the US on this. When your leader does something monumentally stupid, even illegal, you can get rid of him in a day because you can go through the party as well as through Parliament. We don't have that option. We're in locked term limits. So if Johnson was our president today, we would have to wait a minimum of 2.5 years to ditch him. You guys did it in an afternoon. Speed matters right now. You need to understand where the things that make your life possible come from. If it's a secure system, you're good. If it's not a secure system, you need to personally invest in other means of sourcing. Otherwise, when those things go off, you'll just be doing without. It's not a simple process. Supply chains are messy, but anything that ultimately links back to the Chinese or the Russian system in particular, you know that's going away. You know that's going away very, very soon. And so best to be forthright with what the nature of your problem is so you can actually start solving it before it explodes in your face. Germany is a textbook case of what happens when you do the opposite. I think of all the economic sectors that are facing upheaval, the one that people are really underestimating is agriculture. We've got a global disruption to the entire fertilizer supply chain right now. And building new fertilizer capacity is a minimum of a 3-year investment. Roughly 80% of the calories we grow is grown with imported inputs. And we're going to have a really good idea by September, October of this year of just how bad on a global scale the harvest is going to be. It will not improve until such time as we have rebuilt that fertilizer capacity. And that's, you're talking 2025 at the soonest. We're not ready for that. None of us are ready for that.